It was a calm, sunny afternoon in the quiet little town of Elmwood. The warm glow of the sun stretched long, golden beams across the quaint homes lining the main street. Sitting on the front porch of one such home was Walter Grayson, a 93-year-old man whose age concealed stories that no one else in this town could even begin to fathom. Walter's hands, though worn with age, were steady as he cradled his mug of tea. His eyes, sharp as ever, gazed far off into the distance. The tranquil moment was suddenly disrupted by a low, rumbling noise that grew louder with every passing second. Walter didn't so much as blink. That sound had become all too familiar in recent weeks, the unmistakable roar of motorcycles. Moments later, a group of bikers tore into view, their laughter cutting through the stillness of the neighborhood. They skidded to a halt in Walter's yard, scattering gravel across his well-kept lawn. Leading the group was their ringleader, a broad-shouldered man named Axel. Clad in worn leather and covered in tattoos, Axel exuded cockiness, his smirk as permanent as the ink on his skin. Behind him, his gang followed suit, parking their bikes carelessly across Walter's grass. "Well, well," Axel called out, swinging a leg off his bike. "If it ain't our favorite old-timer." The gang erupted into laughter, their mockery filling the air. Walter didn't respond, his expression as calm and steady as ever. This wasn't the first time Axel and his crew had shown up uninvited, and Walter knew it wouldn't be the last. The gang fed off intimidation, and their leader took particular joy in targeting him. "What's wrong, Gamps?" Axel sneered, stepping closer to the porch. "Too scared to say something? Or maybe you just don't got it in you anymore." His words were laced with mockery as he grabbed the cup from Walter's hand and sent it clattering to the floorboards, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. Walter's gaze followed the broken pieces for a moment before slowly lifting back to meet Axel's eyes. His face betrayed nothing, no anger, no fear, just an unsettling calm. "That was unnecessary," Walter said plainly. "You've had your fun. Now I think it's time for you to leave." Axel's smirk widened as he leaned in, bringing his face close to Walter's. "Oh, we're not going anywhere," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "And what are you gonna do about it, old man? Call the cops?" "They ain't going to scare me. I'll be back on the streets before they've even got the paperwork done." Walter didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, one hand slipping into the pocket of his cardigan. "No," he said, his voice low but firm. "I won't be calling the police." For the first time, Axel hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly as he processed Walter's words. "Yeah? Then who you gonna call?" he challenged, his bravado still intact but laced with a flicker of uncertainty. Walter rose to his feet slowly, his every movement deliberate. Though age had taken some of his agility, he still carried himself with a quiet strength. Once he was standing, Walter reached deeper into his pocket and pulled out an old, well-worn flip phone. He held it up just enough for Axel to see. "I'm gonna make one call," Walter said, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. "And when I do, you're all gonna regret ever setting foot on this property." Axel blinked, caught off guard by the steel in Walter's tone. He covered his momentary pause with a laugh, louder and harsher than before, turning back to his crew as if to rally them. "You hear that, boys? Grandpa here thinks he's got some secret weapon up his sleeve." The gang laughed along, but the sound was more forced this time, their leader's uncertainty rippling through the group. Axel turned back to Walter, his sneer returning. "Go ahead," he said, crossing his arms. "Make your big, bad call. Let's see what you've got, old man." Walter didn't respond immediately. Instead, he calmly flipped open the phone, dialed a number, and brought it to his ear. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint sound of the wind rustling through the trees. As Walter waited for the call to connect, he fixed Axel with a steady gaze. "I gave you a chance to walk away," he said quietly, but you made your choice. Now, whatever happens next is on you." The gang shifted uneasily, the weight of Walter's words settling over them. Axel, though still trying to maintain his bravado, took an unconscious step back. Whatever call Walter was making, it wasn't to the cops. And for the first time, the gang began to wonder if they'd pushed the wrong man too far. "Yeah, right. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters?" Axel scoffed, his voice dripping with mockery. Walter's eyes narrowed, his weathered hand pressing a single button on his flip phone. The faint sound of ringing echoed in the tense silence. Axel's laughter erupted, filling the yard, and his gang quickly followed suit, howling like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Over the weeks they had spent tormenting Walter, no one in Elmwood had dared stand up to them. Why would today be any different? Yet beneath the laughter, Axel couldn't quite shake an uneasy feeling. The way Walter stood, calm, unshaken, was wrong. It didn't match the picture of a broken old man. His presence, steady and resolute, gnawed at Axel's confidence. "Who's on the other end of that phone, Gramps? Your knitting circle?" "Huh," Axel sneered, stepping closer, the gang's chuckles urging him on. "What are they gonna do, huh? Throw yarn at us?" Walter didn't respond. His steady eyes stayed locked on Axel, the ringing phone in his hand the only sound cutting through the warm afternoon. Axel's smirk wavered for just a second before returning, whiter and more forced. "Let me guess," Axel pressed, his voice louder now. "You called some old war buddies to scare us off." He snatched the phone from Walter's hand, holding it up for the gang to see. "One call, huh? Let's see who the big hero is." Before he could hang up, the call connected. A calm, measured voice answered on the other end. Without missing a beat, Walter spoke, his voice steady and firm. "It's time. Initiate the procedure." Axel froze, the phone still pressed to his ear. "Procedure? What kind of crap is this?" he spat, glancing at the screen before tossing the phone back at Walter. The old man caught it effortlessly. "You'll understand soon enough," Walter replied, tucking the phone back into his cardigan pocket. His gaze remained fixed on Axel, unflinching, and far too composed for the leader's liking. The bikers were still laughing, though their chuckles had grown uneasy. Axel, trying to shake the tension creeping into his gut, barked out, "This guy's full of it. Come on, let's teach him a lesson he won't forget." One of the bikers hesitated, muttering under his breath, "Maybe we should just bounce, Axel. This dude's not worth it." Axel shot him a glare. "Shut it. He's bluffing. Old man's got nothing. We own this town, remember?" He turned back to Walter, raising his hand as if to shove him back into the chair. But before Axel could make a move, Walter's phone buzzed in his pocket. Calmly, Walter retrieved it, his lips curling into a small, knowing smile. He opened the text and glanced at the screen. "What now?" Axel growled, snatching the phone yet again, his eyes narrowed as he read the message aloud. "Target confirmed. Phase 1 activated." The words struck Axel like a bucket of ice water. He glanced up at Walter, searching for some hint of an explanation, but the old man offered nothing. He just stood there, serene, like he knew something Axel didn't. "What the hell is this?" Axel barked, shoving the phone back at Walter, as if it burned to hold on to it. Walter simply slipped it back into his pocket and turned toward his front door. "You made your choice," Walter said without turning around. "Now you'll have to live with it." Axel stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. The gang was murmuring behind him, their bravado fading fast. Finally, one of them spoke up, their voice low and uneasy. "Maybe we should go, man. This doesn't feel right." Axel clenched his fists, furious at the unease spreading through his crew. He barked back at them. "He's just some washed-up geezer trying to scare us. He can't do nothing." But even as the words left his mouth, Axel couldn't shake the knot forming in his stomach. Walter disappeared inside, leaving the bikers standing in the yard. Axel's confidence was crumbling, the laughter gone, replaced by a heavy silence. After a long pause, Axel growled, "Fine, let's get out of here. But this ain't over." The gang revved their bikes and tore out of Walter's yard, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. But as they rode back to their clubhouse, Axel couldn't stop thinking about the message. PHS-1 activated. The words echoed in his mind, and no amount of bravado could drown out the quiet voice in his head, warning him they'd made a mistake. Rex's mind spun with questions, the strange phone call and cryptic messages replaying over and over. What did protocol mean? Why had the old man seemed so unfazed by their threats? Back at the clubhouse, Rex paced, trying to shake off the unease gnawing at him. He called the gang together, barking orders, boasting about their next moves. But beneath his tough exterior, a nagging dread refused to let go. Later that night, Rex's phone buzzed. A notification from his bank lit up the screen. Frowning, he opened it. The message sent a chill through him. "Your account has been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity." "Ah, the hell," Rex muttered, immediately checking his other accounts. Each one displayed the same message: frozen. Panic and anger boiled over as he called the bank, demanding answers. The representative on the line offered only vague reassurances about unusual transactions and warned that it could take several days to resolve. Slamming the phone down, Rex cursed under his breath. Was this a coincidence? Or could John somehow be behind it? The situation spiraled quickly. One by one, Rex's gang members began receiving similar notifications. Bank accounts locked, credit cards declined, unauthorized charges appearing out of nowhere. It was as if their lives were being unraveled piece by piece, systematically and deliberately. Meanwhile, John sat in his living room, a faint smile playing on his lips as he watched the chaos unfold on his computer screen. His grandson Ethan's voice came through the speakerphone, calm and efficient. "They're feeling the squeeze, Grandpa. Accounts frozen. I've flagged their names with every financial system I could access. By tomorrow, they won't be able to buy gas for their bikes." John nodded, his expression unwavering. "Good work, Ethan, but this is just the beginning." Ethan chuckled softly, intrigued. "What's next?" Leaning back in his chair, John's eyes glinted with a quiet determination. "I made a promise, and I'm going to keep it. We're taking them down completely, financially, legally, and physically." The next phase was already in motion. John had tapped into old military contacts, gathering intelligence on Rex and his gang. What Ethan had uncovered revealed that their petty harassment was just the surface. The gang was deeply entangled in organized crime, and John intended to expose it all. By morning, chaos erupted. Rex awoke to find his gang in shambles. Half of them had been arrested overnight on outstanding warrants, dragged from their homes in their sleep. The others scrambled to understand how their lives had been dismantled in mere hours. Rex's phone buzzed constantly with frantic messages from his crew. "This doesn't make any sense," Pete, one of his most loyal members, exclaimed. "It's like someone's watching everything we do." Rex slammed his fist onto the table, his frustration boiling over. "It's that old man! He's behind this." Pete blinked, his voice trembling. "How? He's just one guy, Rex. What could he possibly—" "I don't know," Rex roared. "But I'm not letting him get away with this. Get the bikes ready. We're paying him another visit." Before they could leave, the rumble of engines outside caught their attention. Rex's gut tightened as he peeked through the window. A convoy of unmarked black SUVs pulled up in front of the clubhouse. Doors opened, and men in suits stepped out, flashing badges. "FBI, stay where you are," one of them barked. Rex froze. The gang scattered, but there was nowhere to go. In minutes, Rex found himself in handcuffs, his face pressed against the hood of one of the SUVs. As they loaded him into the vehicle, the weight of John's parting words sank in. "You're all gonna wish you never set foot on this lawn." Rex clenched his jaw, rage and disbelief warring within him. Just hours ago, he had been untouchable, ruling the town with his gang. Now his empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But one thought consumed Rex's mind. John Harris. How had that old man managed to pull this off? Back at John's house, the elderly veteran sat on his porch, sipping coffee, watching as unmarked cars drove by, Rex among their occupants. The operation was working, but John knew this was just the beginning. Rex was a piece of the puzzle, and decades of experience told him the bigger threat still loomed in the shadows. His phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "They got Rex," Ethan said, excitement in his voice. "He's being taken in for questioning. The feds are all over it, just like you said they would be." John nodded, his voice steady. "Good. But this isn't over, Ethan. Rex is just a symptom of something larger. We need to dig deeper. There are others, and we're not stopping until every last one of them is taken down." Ethan's fingers flew across his keyboard. "I'm on it. I've already flagged more accounts tied to their syndicate. There's a trail here, Grandpa. It's big." John's expression darkened. "Don't stop. I want everything. Bank records, offshore accounts, criminal networks. We're shutting them down for good." Later that evening, John retreated to his study. On the desk was an old, worn photograph of himself and his military unit. The faces in the picture were young but weathered, men bound by loyalty and a shared sense of duty. Many of them were long gone, but a few remained, still loyal in their own way. John picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. After several rings, a gravelly voice answered. "John Harris, I wondered if you'd ever call." "It's been a long time, McCaffrey," John said, recognizing the voice of his former commanding officer. "Too long. What can I do for you?" John's tone grew serious. "I need a favor, the kind that involves taking down a criminal syndicate." There was a pause. "What are we talking about, John?" "I've got intel. A gang here is connected to something much larger. I need manpower, trusted people who can act fast." McCaffrey chuckled. "You always had a knack for diving headfirst into the impossible. Send me what you have. I'll rally the contacts and make sure this gets handled." John exhaled, relief washing over him. If anyone could mobilize resources and keep it quiet, it was McCaffrey. With his government and military connections, they stood a real chance of dismantling not just Rex's gang, but the organization pulling the strings. Meanwhile, in a sleek, high-rise office far from Brooksville, a man named Victor Lang reviewed a file on his desk. As a power broker in the criminal underworld, Victor's influence extended into drug trafficking, money laundering, and illegal arms deals. He rarely concerned himself with local gangs like Rex's. But this was different. The file detailed arrests, frozen assets, and FBI investigations, all connected to Rex's gang. Victor scowled. This kind of exposure was dangerous, threatening to unravel parts of his empire. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "We have a problem," he said curtly. "Someone is interfering with my operations. I need them identified and neutralized. Quietly." "Consider it done," the voice on the other end replied. Victor ended the call, his mind calculating the next steps. Survival in his line of work meant staying ahead of threats, and whoever was behind this would soon learn how dangerous it was to challenge Victor Lang. In Brooksville, the town breathed a sigh of relief. With Rex and his gang dismantled, a fragile peace settled over the streets. But John wasn't fooled. This calm was temporary. The real fight was just beginning. One afternoon, Ethan pulled up at John's house, a laptop in hand. His face was pale, his expression intense. "Grandpa, you need to see this," Ethan said, setting up on the porch. John leaned forward as Ethan opened a series of files, revealing a web of transactions. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and money transfers tied to criminal enterprises. "This is bigger than Rex," Ethan said grimly. "He was just a pawn. The real players are still out there." John's jaw tightened as he absorbed the scale of what they were dealing with. "Then we go after them. Every last one." Ethan nodded, determination matching his grandfather's. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. As the disoriented bikers stumbled on the porch, John seized the moment. He had spent the day preparing his home for this exact scenario, and his military instincts had kicked in long before the engines roared in the distance. With precision, he activated a remote-controlled mechanism, releasing smoke canisters strategically placed around the property. The thick fog enveloped the bikers, forcing them to scatter and regroup. From his vantage point, John assessed their movements through the live feeds from hidden cameras around the house. "Ethan," John whispered, his voice steady, "stay here, keep monitoring the cameras, and alert me to any changes." Ethan nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he tracked the attackers' movements. "They're splitting up, Grandpa. 2 are headed for the back door, and 3 are circling the garage." "Good," John replied, his eyes narrowing. "Let them think they have the upper hand." He moved swiftly through the house, his steps silent and deliberate. Decades of training had taught him how to remain unseen, even in his own home. As one of the bikers attempted to force the back door open, John triggered a rigged mechanism that released a burst of pepper spray directly into the intruder's face. The man reeled back, coughing and shouting, as another stepped forward, only to trip over a cleverly placed wire that sent him sprawling into the dirt. Meanwhile, the bikers near the garage found themselves facing a new obstacle. John had rigged a series of motion-activated lights and sirens that erupted as soon as they got close. The blinding light and deafening noise threw them into chaos, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Inside, Ethan kept John updated. "They're regrouping on the east side. Looks like they're trying to breach through the windows." "Let them try," John muttered. He positioned himself near one of the side windows, a sturdy wooden bat in hand. As the glass shattered and a hand reached inside, John swung with precision, knocking the biker off balance and sending him tumbling to the ground outside. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scar running down his face, barked orders to the others. "Stop playing games, get inside and finish this." But their confidence was fading. Each attempt to breach the house met with another trap, another setback. Hidden caltrops scattered near the side entrances punctured their boots, and strategically placed tripwires sent them crashing to the ground. From his position inside, John watched their frustration grow. "Ethan, keep recording everything. I want these faces on file. McCaffrey will need them for the case." "Already on it," Ethan replied, glancing nervously at the cameras. "But they're not giving up. They're regrouping again, and they're mad." John nodded grimly. He knew the bikers wouldn't retreat without a fight. They had their orders and failure wasn't an option for men like them. But John wasn't about to let them take the fight to him on their terms. Grabbing a flare gun from a nearby drawer, John stepped out onto the porch, his silhouette framed against the light from the house. The bikers paused, surprised by his bold move. "You're not welcome here," John called out, his voice carrying a sharp edge. "Leave. Now, or you'll regret it." The leader stepped forward, sneering. "Huh? What are you gonna do, old man? You think you can scare us off with a toy?" John's response was swift. He fired the flare into the air, its brilliant light illuminating the scene and signaling to McCaffrey's task force, who were already closing in. The sound of approaching sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The bikers hesitated, their confidence wavering. They exchanged glances, realizing that their mission had been compromised. You want to find out what an old man can do? John said, his voice calm but firm. Be my guest. The leader scowled, but the sound of sirens sealed his decision. Fall back, he barked, motioning for his men to retreat. As the bikers scrambled to their motorcycles and roared away into the night, John lowered the flare gun, his expression unreadable. He turned to Ethan, who had stepped onto the porch, his face pale but determined. Grandpa, that was intense, Ethan said, his voice shaking slightly. It's not over yet, John replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Lang will send more men. But now we know their playbook, and McCaffrey's team is on their trail. As the task force arrived, McCaffrey himself stepped out of an unmarked car, his expression a mix of relief and respect. You held them off, he said, shaking his head. I should have known you'd have a few tricks up your sleeve. John shrugged. Just doing what needed to be done. But we need to move fast. Lang won't stop until he's neutralized. McCaffrey nodded, his jaw set. Then let's finish this. The bikers, scrambling to recover from the chaos, found themselves ensnared in carefully crafted traps. 2 of them were yanked off their feet, tangled in crude but effective restraints. Their leader, a burly brute named Bullied, growled in frustration but refused to back down. Get in there, Bullied barked, smashing the front door open with a sledgehammer. But as he barged in, a stark figure greeted him. Jack stood firm, his weathered hands gripping an old but reliable shotgun. The barrel pointed unwaveringly at Bullied's chest. You've got one chance to walk away, Jack said, his voice calm but with an edge that could cut steel. Bullied smirked, unfazed. You think you can take me, Grandpa? He sneered. Jack's gaze didn't flinch. I've taken down worse than you, Bullied roared, lunging forward. Jack fired a warning shot, the blast grazing Bullied's arm, sending him reeling in shock and pain. Bullied cursed, clutching his bleeding arm. But before he could regroup, the night erupted with the wail of sirens and the blinding glare of flashing lights. Unmarked SUVs screeched onto the property, and a team of federal agents stormed out, weapons drawn. Backup had arrived just in time, thanks to Carter's call. The takedown was swift and brutal. Bullied's crew was no match for the precision and force of the agents. One by one, they were subdued, handcuffed, and hauled into armored vehicles. Bullied, snarling like a caged beast, glared at Jack as the agents dragged him away. You'll pay for this, he spat, his face a mask of hatred. Jack didn't respond, his steady gaze tracking Bullied's retreat into the shadows. He knew the real battle wasn't over. Bullied was just a pawn, a blunt instrument of a much larger game. Victor Kane, the mastermind, was still out there. Kata, the federal agent in charge, approached Jack with a look of respect. Still sharp as ever, he said, clapping Jack on the back. Old habits don't die easy, Jack replied with a faint smile. But this isn't over. Carter nodded, his expression grim. We're closing in on Kane. We've seized millions in assets and shut down several of his operations. But the man himself? Still a ghost. Jack's face hardened. He'll come for me. I'm the loose thread he can't ignore. But I'll be ready when he does. As the dust settled and the agents combed through the aftermath, Jack sat on his porch with his grandson Tyler. The immediate threat had passed, but the storm was far from over. How'd you know exactly what to do? Tyler asked, admiration and curiosity mingling in his voice. Jack chuckled softly. Experience, kid. You live long enough, you learn to always stay ready. Their brief moment of peace was shattered when Tyler's phone buzzed with a new message. His face turned pale as he read it. What's wrong? Jack asked, his instincts kicking in. Tyler silently turned the phone toward him. The message was from an unknown number, just 3 ominous words. I'm coming, Jack. Victor Kane had made his move. Jack's expression didn't change. He'd anticipated this. Kane wasn't the type to let a challenge go unanswered. "We need to prepare," Jack said quietly, his mind already calculating. Tyler's fingers flew across his laptop. "I'll trace the message. If we can find him, we can stop him before he strikes." Jack nodded. "Good. But stay sharp. Kane won't play fair." As Tyler worked, Jack made another call to Carter. They needed to hit Kane hard and fast before he could tighten his grip. Time was against them. Hours ticked by in tense silence. Finally, Tyler's screen lit up. "Got him," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "An abandoned factory on the outskirts. He's dug in, but we've got a shot." Jack grabbed his shotgun, his jaw set in determination. "Then let's end this." Carter's team mobilized swiftly. They approached the factory under the cover of darkness, surrounding it with military precision. Jack, despite his age, insisted on joining the front line. As the team breached the factory, chaos exploded. Kane's men opened fire, but the agents were prepared. Jack moved like a ghost through the fray, instincts honed over decades guiding him. He pushed deeper into the building, knowing Kane would be at the center of the web. Jack found him in a dimly lit office surrounded by monitors and stacks of documents. Victor Kane stood tall, his presence exuding menace. "So, you're the infamous Jack Harrington," Kane said, his voice like cold steel. "I've heard plenty about you." "It's over," Jack replied, his shotgun steady. "Your empire's finished." Kane smirked, unbothered. "You think taking me out will change anything? Someone else will take my place. You've accomplished nothing." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Maybe, but you won't be around to see it." Kane's hand twitched toward a pistol on the desk, but Jack didn't hesitate. The shotgun roared, the shot precise. Kane crumpled, his reign of terror snuffed out. The fight was over. Kane's men were rounded up, his operations dismantled, but the weight of it all lingered in the air. Carter approached Jack, his expression one of deep respect. "We couldn't have done this without you." Jack nodded. "Team effort, just glad we stopped him in time." As dawn broke, bathing the town in golden light, Jack and Tyler returned to the porch. The storm had passed, but the scars remained. "You did it," Tyler said softly. "It's finally over." Jack stared at the horizon. "Not really, kid. There's always another fight, but for now, we rest."